Welcome to Books on Air, the podcast that you don't want to miss. You're about to get a sneak peek at what goes on behind the scenes with authors. You'll find out their secret recipe for creating a book. We'll tell you where they get their ideas, and you will get the inside scoop on their next project. Want to know more? We'll tell you where to find them on social media. Are you ready? Well, I cannot wait to introduce you to today's author. Her name is Clare Cinnamon, and she's here to tell us about her latest novel, Lainey Cash. I always do research on the authors before I interview them, and I have to tell you a funny story. First of all, Clare holds 2 degrees. She's got one in business, and she's got a second in psychology. And as I was going through my research, I found this quote about writing. She said she began writing as a compulsion. It didn't feel like a choice. She wrote her first book at age 4 before she even knew how to write. She dictated it to an adult by saying, Hey, get a pen and a piece of paper. You've got to write this down. Clare, I love that story. Welcome.
Thank you.
You have been a writer all of your life. Often, when people are writers, especially at a young age like that, there's someone either in the household or a relative, or there's someone or something that happens that triggers that writing. Was that the case with you, or did you just naturally have that compulsion?
I had an active imagination, and I had an imaginary friend before I started writing, so the imagination was there, but I did have a major surgery in the hospital, and that first story that you mentioned, to grab a pen, happened in the hospital when my tongue had a bit of nerve damage and was severed, and I overheard the doctor say I may not speak again. And so I think it was a bout of determination that really sparked my writing career right there at age 4 in the hospital. Like, oh, no, I have a lot to say.
Are you an only child by any chance?
No, I have a younger sister, and she's an artist.
Really?
That's right.
So this creative gene, and I'm doing air quotes, just sort of flows through the family.
Well, it flows through the 2 of us. She's now doing all my covers as of the 4th project, and so she reads my mind and I read her mind, and it's been a lot of fun.
I love it. How many books have you written?
How many books have I written? I have finished over 20 novels and written probably 12 or 15 more that are not quite finished.
Now, you at first told yourself that this was a hobby.
Yes.
When did you reach the point that you said to yourself and to your husband, I think this is no longer a hobby?
Well, I got a lot of praise in all the way through school from teachers for my writing, and it was a bit overwhelming, and I was not comfortable with that for a long time. And actually, it's the reverse of what you said. It was my husband who said to me, you do realize this is not a hobby. When you do something for 7 or 8 hours a day, it's not a hobby. And so, he kind of lit a fire under me, and that was great.
Well, let's talk about this latest book. Let's talk about Lainey Cash. Let's give our listeners a little bit of an overview.
Okay, so I wrote Lainey Cash in the year 2000. And to me, she was a bit revolutionary at the time. She's a girl farmer, and she's an only child, and her father is about to die. And so Lainey, has that in her blood to hold on to the land and to do her best. And so she sets out to become a real farmer, and unfortunately, she can't do it all on her own. So she seeks out the rival farmer across the road, which is Jed McCrae. And he's 10 years older than her, and their families have hated each other and been in competition like farmers are a lot of times over the same land. So, of course, Lainey and Jed start to fall for each other because the chemistry is there right from the start.
Now, this is a romance novel. Your genre is really romance, right?
My genre is romance suspense, according to my publisher, because there is always a sideline story that's full of suspense. There's a bad guy. There's something going on that's under the table as well as the romance.
I like romance suspense. That's probably one of my favorite genres because it has that snap and that chemistry of romance, but at the same time, that mystery, I always think adds a little bit of bubble to what's going on with the situation. I like that.
So, you mentioned that I majored in psychology, and when people say you write romance, and I'm always a little bit surprised. I do. There's a lot of romance, but really what I'm doing is enjoying exploring the spectrum of human emotion. Like, I want all the emotions in there,
It's interesting to know what you're looking at. What's your process like? I'm always curious. Some authors will sit down and they'll outline the whole book almost before they, or totally outline the whole book. I know Jeff Deaver does that. He's a former attorney, so he sits down and he almost writes the book in outline form, and then all he has to do almost is go back and fill in the dialogue. And then other authors are the seat of the pants kind of author. They sit down, the movie starts in their head, and they start to just type. And then there are people who fall in between and do all kinds of different things. The creative process works so interestingly for each one of us. What's your process? I'm curious.
Yeah, so it started with that original bout in the hospital when they said, you may not speak, and it was like in the middle of the night. No, I will speak at 4 years old. And so I'm a total pantser. It started that way, and it's gone that way my whole life. Like, I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night. I've never thought of these characters before. All of a sudden they have names, and the scenery is so obvious to me that it has to come out on paper. It's a frenzy. And now, I will come back once I get the gist of it down on paper. I will come back and fill in and say, hey, this would look good here, or I need a character like this. Or one of my favorite stories is when I got done with the Lainey Cash trilogy, I realized no one had a pet in the whole trilogy. And so just for the sake of, being common and believable, I went back in and wrote Jed with a dog. So, I will do that type of planning after the fact, but the story is total pantser for me every time.
Probably as you read through it yourself, all of a sudden you will see exactly what you said, a little hole here or a little thing you need to take out there, or that character really would they really say that? Because most fiction writers that I talk to, and I've written a little fiction myself, say that the characters really write the story for them, and that the characters will not do certain things if it's out of their quote character.
Yes. So I don't really get a lot of beta readers because my characters come in so clear to me. I know exactly how they're going to act. Not to say I'm never wrong. A funny example of being wrong is after I read the first 2 books in the trilogy to my husband, I always read aloud to him. He likes for me to read aloud. When I finished the second one, he said, he is a farmer. He's been National Farmer of the Year. He said, you've done one thing wrong with Jed McCrae. And I said, what's that? He said, Jed McCrae would have sex in a field. He said, he's a farmer. He would have sex in a field. I said, okay, point taken. And I'll see in that case, he was exactly right. But I would have never thought of that. At the time, I was 26 years old. I'd been married for like 5 years. I would not have thought of that, and my husband was exactly right.
Well, and your husband's a farmer, and so
he is.
He has that insider knowledge. I have to share something with the listeners, and I think I'd like for you to share a little bit of the book with them, but I have to share your first description because we had such an interesting, rollicking discussion about this. The very first, when they go find the book, and we'll talk about where it's available, there is a wonderful excerpt, and the first thing they will read is about Jed McCrae. Here's the description. You hooked me with this description of Jed McCrae. It's in the looks, the walk, the voice, the attitude. He had the face, the body, the backdrop, and the money. The minute I read that description, somebody, that guy, and I'm doing air quotes, that guy, every woman that just heard the description I read, someone instantly popped into their head because we all know that guy.
Yeah.
What a
or you wish you do.
Well, if you didn't, I never dated that guy. I just knew that guy. Mm-hmm. You know? And so from the outside, this is who that person was. And I can't imagine that there's not a woman listening to us right now that hasn't had a that guy somewhere in their life. And your insight, your psychology, I think, really shows right there. Is there a part of the book that you like, that you'd like to share with the listeners?
Well, I didn't mark my favorite parts because they're lengthy. You know, it's like certain chapters.
Sure.
But I did mark something that just sort of summarizes Delaina, Lainey Cash's, you know, what she's in the middle of. And so I'll read that for you if you want me to.
Perfect.
Okay. Delaina went straight home and took a midday shower, thinking she could wash off Jed McCrae. Too late, she realized he stamped his well-known mark on her heart, her dreams, her sexuality. She felt stupid for almost becoming a Jed McCrae has-been, yet she believed he was genuine in giving her advice about cash way and respected her aptitude for business and farming. Cabot sent nice flowers with a silly sweet message. His bank ties were a necessity to cash way. She had to mend their relationship soon. She dressed in her work clothes as the grandfather clock chimed 3 times. An afternoon in the dirt, like a bottle of fine wine for her.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And let's talk about the trilogy. Now, this is book 1. Now, the trilogy's title is 15,000 Times for 50 Years. What does that mean? Where did that come from?
So that's the series. There are 8 or 9, I think 9 books in the series, and the trilogy is part of the series. 15,000 Times for 50 Years. So, you know, I mentioned it's romance suspense, and it's actually a play on monogamy. And if you choose one person to be with, then there are a lot of things you'll do about 15,000 times in 50 years if you live long enough. So my mom said, "Is it sex?" I said, "Well, you know, there will be that if you're lucky, but you're going to hold hands. You're probably going to cross up or, you know, yell or kiss or any number of things, about 15,000 times if you're married that long."
Very clever. I like that very much. Lainey Cash is book 1. Then you've got a Lainey and Jed, that's book 2. And then Delaina is going to be book 3, or is book 3. Are all 3 of those books available right now?
Only book 1 and 2 are available due to COVID. They asked me to wait on book 3 until the end of the year and see if we could, you know, get some more word out. It's been a challenge, of course. So they're all produced, and we're just holding book 3 until later in the year.
Now, I know that we have dangled this in front of our listeners like you dangle a little mouse in front of a kitty cat. I know they're dying to know where they can find the book. Amazon is the big boy book dealer in the universe right now. So everybody knows about Amazon, and many people, probably not everyone, but many people will go to Amazon for their book. I looked at the Amazon listing for your book this morning, and it's there. I want to make sure that the listeners know where to find it. So let me give them the name, spell everything, so that all they have to do is put that in the search feature on the top of the Amazon page, click on it, and it'll come up. The name of the book is Lainey, Lainey, Cash, Cash, by Clare, Clare, Cinnamon, Cinnamon. Now, all of the books that you have written are available, but if they put that in the search feature, that book comes up. In the upper right-hand corner, there's, on many of the books that Amazon has, a way to get a little excerpt. It'll say, look in here. And so if you'll click on that little look button there in the right-hand corner of the cover, then the book opens and it lists everything. It lists all the chapters, and then there's a beginning. And that's where I got the wonderful description of Jed, was the very first rattle out of the proverbial box. It was right there, and you had me. There's a very, very, very nice excerpt from the book. Is there somewhere else that the book is available?
It's also at Barnes & Noble.
Now, you're not doing a website, but you do have a blog. Tell me about your blog, Cinnamon, Clare. I want to call you Cinnamon for some reason.
Oh, that's fine. So it's from Clare Cinnamon, and it's WordPress blog. And I write about other things. Sometimes I'm writing about something going on with my books and what's coming out next. But I also, if I just have random thoughts, I kind of blog on there as well. It's a little bit of a glimpse into my life as an author.
Oh, I think that's cool. I'm sure that there are some of our would-be authors listening to us, and I'm sure that they're curious. And I always like to hear that a successful writer is willing to share and talk a little bit about their process and maybe give these new would-be writers some ideas about how they could get started. What about Facebook, Twitter, Instagram? I think you're doing all those. How could people find you on Facebook?
Sure. So it's Clare Cinnamon Author on Instagram and Facebook, and just Clare Cinnamon on Twitter. Okay.
Anything else that you want to tell them about any social media? Is there anything you want them to be able to get in touch with you, anything like that?
I was invited to the International Book Fair in London and New York this year, and we had a string of book signings across the country planned, my husband and I. And, the situation we're in right now with COVID has put a lot of that on hold. So the best thing right now to do is just look on social media under the things that we listed. And, if I hear from you, I'll reach out.
That's, you're right. Where we are right now is in such a unusual place, and we really don't know where we're going to be next week, let alone what's going to happen within the next year. And I'm sorry that the book signings have been canceled, because I think that's something that's so important. Authors, your readers like to see you. They like to meet you. They like to be able to say to you, I like your writing. I like your books. It's fun to talk to somebody that writes as well as you do. You really do a terrific job.
Thank you so much. A lot of things have changed in this world with social media and technology. But one thing I've found of being an author is when people hold a book in their hand, they're still in awe a little bit of the whole process and the fact that it's published. So I'm sorry that we're not out signing books right now, because there is still, like I said, just a little bit of awe to being in a book.
You're absolutely right. And that creative process, I think part of it is the admiration of the creative process, because I think that is, some people just don't have it. They don't understand how it works. When you talked about, I've written a little fiction and I've written a little nonfiction. I don't pretend to be a successful author, but what I do know is that creative process and how it takes over, and how you wake up in the middle of the night and you've had a dream about the characters and they've come to you and they've said this, 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 and this, and if you don't get up and if you don't write it down, poof, it's gone the next morning. And you described that same kind of creative process, and it almost has a magical quality about it, especially to someone who doesn't have that. They read the books and they go, I can't imagine how this comes out of somebody's head. But it does. It's amazing.
Well, Suzanne, you're right. It's a little bit magical even to the person that's doing it, the writing. And to speak to the would-be writers that you mentioned a minute ago, for them to find a level of comfort in having that ability is going to be half the battle. So to look at it and say, I just did this, they have to come to a level of acceptance. And so I just speak to the writers out there that it's a gift, and you allow yourself to enjoy and display that gift in any way that you feel comfortable.
I'm sitting here nodding my head. I love that. I'm so glad you said that to them. How do you work with your sister? I just thought about that. How do you work with your sister to create the covers?
I'm such a passionate person, but that is the question I've been waiting on. It is so much fun. We love life, and we've always been a bit of gypsies anyway and laughed together. But this painting, writing thing, she's been painting forever, like I've been writing forever, and we never intertwined the two until, like I said, my fourth project. And it was just like I called her and I said, I'd love to put you on the front of the book. She said, don't tell me anything about the book, okay? just tell me like 3 or 4 words. So I did. And she said, okay, I'll get back with you. And so like 4 days later, she called me and she said, I'm about to send you a text of a painting. And she sent it, and I called her and I said, oh my gosh, that's my book. How did you do that? And so now we've just been doing it over and over again. And we go and we look back at her paintings from years ago. And I say, oh my gosh, that's the cover of so-and-so that I wrote in 1995. How did we not see that? So it's just been a fascinating process.
Oh, I love that. You guys really have this almost psychic connection, don't you?
We do. It is fast, but we came out of this, there's a quote out there, and I'm not going to get it right, but something about the sibling bond being the tightest bond because you were raised by the exact same 2 people, and that makes so much sense to me. And so we kind of look at each other and say, why not? Why would you not be painting what I'm writing? So
something else struck me about the book as I went through it. There's a poem. Are you also a poet?
I am. I'm a poet. I'm a songwriter. I'm a just quote writer. Words come to me in all sorts of ways, Suzanne. As a little girl and growing up, I would grab a recipe book, I'd grab an atlas, an almanac, whatever I hadn't read already that was available in the house, because I'm just so fascinated with the construction of words.
You know what? You are, in your soul and heart of hearts, a storyteller. I mean, everything that you just said, you are a true storyteller. You are a back porch storyteller. I'll bet when you go to a party and you start telling stories, groups of people form around you because you have that gift and that ability. It's so wonderful to talk to somebody like that. It's just such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being our guest. I have one more question for you, Clare. The books are entertaining, they're romantic, they're a little mysterious, they are fun to read, they keep your attention, they're terrific books. When I, as a reader, close the back cover metaphorically, because I know some people literally close it, but other people just get off the device. When I literally or figuratively close the back cover of that book, do you want me to just think I've read a terrific, rollicking, interesting story? Or is there something else that you want me to take away?
With Lainey Cash, there is a message there for me, and it's the evolution of a woman. I laughed, I cried, I smiled, I got mad, I cussed, writing it. And so I would hope that you have all those emotions. But I like for it to be individual interpretation, too. Whatever you want it to be, I hope you find it there because she is a woman and she is very determined and career-minded, but she falls in love. She's human. So, the one thing that stands out for me from my readers is that I've had some people message me and say they've never finished a whole book before and they finished Lainey Cash. As an author, to make somebody want to read and finish a book, that's the ultimate. And so whatever your reason for finishing is, I'm just so happy that some people have learned to enjoy reading by reading Lainey Cash.
I could not agree with you more. That has to be one of the highest compliments that any author can receive, is for somebody to say, I don't normally finish a book, but I finished yours. And I don't doubt that for a second, Clare. This has just been too much fun. You are delightful. I wish we were next door neighbors and could have coffee. Thank you so much for being my guest today on the Books on Air podcast.
Thank you, Suzanne, and I would love to have coffee with you anyway.
Remember, you can find Lainey Cash as well as Book 2 in the series on Amazon. And remember, it's Lainey, and it's by Clare, Clare, Cinnamon. Book 2 is Lainey and Jed. You've been listening to the Books on Air podcast, brought to you on webtalkradio.net. You can also hear this podcast on iTunes as well as iHeartRadio. I'm Suzanne Harris, and I hope that you'll join our next Books on Air podcast because, remember, it's the place to be because you never know who will be here with me. Thanks so much for listening.